This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so very much for joining us today to the Metropolitan Water District Representative Caucus and special board meeting of the West Basin Board of Directors. May 5th at 12:33. I call this meeting to order, and we have determined we have a quorum. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Mr. GM, is there any public comment?
President Williams, there's no public comment today.
Okay, then we will move to the discussion items, and I will now give control of the agenda to you, Mr. GM. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, President Williams, and members of our board and the public and our staff and our other guests that are on the call. Happy Cinco de Mayo. We have Jeff here. I'll go quickly to Jeff Keitlinger, GM of Metropolitan. We have him for the first 30 minutes. I see we've used up about 4 of it already. And he will be assisted at some point by Kathy Viatella and I believe Catano on some of the subjects. So I'm going to turn it over to the Metropolitan General Manager, Jeff Keitlinger, who talked about drought and a few other topics. Jeff?
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, President Williams. Happy to be here at the West Basin Caucus. A couple of items I want to cover on Metropolitan, and then for the first half of this meeting, and then I'm going to I have to depart at 1 o'clock for another meeting. And I do want some updates on a couple of matters. Catano Kassane can update you on the process for the demand management rate refinement issues, and Kathy Viatella and D-Zinc can talk about the Christina Garcia legislation that is and Metropolitan the proposed position to take a position on that. That's an item on our agenda, AB 1195. Real briefly, I also wanted to mention, I know it's come up here a couple times, on the, we have a Shaw law firm, outside law firm, doing an independent analysis of Metropolitan's EE&O policies. And the update on that is they had a good news in the sense that they had a survey, and we're in the 85 percentile or so of Metropolitan employees have responded to that. Very robust response from employees, and a strong desire by many Metropolitan employees to meet and discuss issues with the Shaw law firm. They want to be extremely thorough, and they're doing those interviews and that review of those comments. That's going to take a little longer than they thought. We had been hoping to get that report out in the May timeframe, and it looks like that'll slide into June-ish timeframe. So updates on those. Then I think the number one issue I wanted to cover, and I'm going to ask Devin to expand on it after I cover some of the items, is the extraordinary drought that's taking place, not just California, but the whole American Southwest. And you're going to see a lot of activity speed up very quickly, and Metropolitan will also be taking actions. And the numbers are pretty stunning, even for those of us who've been in this business a while and seen a lot of these types of things. So for instance, in the Rocky Mountains on the Colorado River, we had reached a peak of about an 88% of average snowpack, which is below average, but not stunningly below average. And historically, one would have expected to see runoff to the rivers, streams, and reservoirs in the Rockies to be in the 80-some percentile. The latest measurement of runoff is that it's about 28%. So more than well over half of the snowpack has basically vanished. And where there's a number of factors driving that. Mostly it's being driven by high temperatures. So you have much higher evaporation than usual of snowpack and water. You're also, because conditions have been so dry for so long, it's just going into the groundwater. And normally when it goes into groundwater, it goes into the earth, it normally eventually makes its way into the rivers and reservoirs. And it is the heat and the sublimation of that is just actually, none of that water is reaching the reservoirs or streams. And then finally, the high temperatures are causing spring to occur 3 to 4 weeks earlier in the Rocky Mountains. And what that means is then those plants start using water when normally they wouldn't be using it in that March timeframe. So we still have another month or so to go before we get to, sometimes we get some late spring storms in the Rocky Mountains, and we'll see if any of those occur. But if they don't, that 28% runoff may even drop even further. What that means for the Colorado River is almost a lock now, a certainty that you'll see shortage declared next year. And it'll be the first ever official shortage on the Colorado River. The primary impact is on Arizona, secondary impact on Nevada, very slight. And then no impact to California as of yet. But the chances of an impact to California and thus to metropolitan by 2025 timeframe 2026 has gone up from a chance of a 10% chance of that occurring to now about a 60% chance of it occurring. So these are huge shifts that we've never seen occur this rapidly, and it's a real sign of climate change, high heat, and extreme drought conditions. Shifting to California, the story is pretty much the same. The State Water Project has now received a 5% allocation. That is the tied for the lowest allocation ever received, and which was 2015. And so we've now received a tie for the worst allocation ever. And if they were actually going to recalibrate it, which there's a good chance they won't. And once you get to these low numbers, it's hard to really move it. Statistically, the numbers are probably closer to 3% would be more accurate. What that means is the reservoirs are going to be way down. And the same story is occurring in the Sierras that has occurred in the Rocky Mountains, where you have you had a below average snowpack in the 60-70% range, so lower than the Rockies. But we're also having the same issue where the runoff just isn't occurring. And again, it's the high temperatures and drought conditions driving it, where the water isn't even reaching streams. Streams are at their lowest levels. They're estimating that the runoff in the Sierras is in the 15 to 20% range, so even lower than the Rocky Mountains. And so if we go back to what happened in 2015, Department of Water Resources had to go before the state board and ask for emergency relief on salinity standards in the Delta. They went in and put in emergency rock barriers to help try and control ocean tide pushing into the Delta to maintain salinity levels even at the higher levels, but less high than they would normally reach. They're looking at preserving cold water flow in the reservoirs for the salmon fisheries, and so that impacts both Oroville and Shasta. And you'll see a lot of the state having to move to these actions most likely over the next few weeks, months. What does that mean for metropolitan? Well, for us, there's going to be a host of actions that we're going to be taking. We had originally received permission from our board to go make purchases of transfer water. Very little transfer water, as you can expect in a year like this. But the small amounts there, metropolitan could potentially be purchasing, and it looks as if it's going to be 10 to 10,000 acre feet kind of range. Those are pretty small numbers. Just to give people a perspective, in the 1980-81 drought, the drought water bank was several 100,000 acre feet. That means this drought water bank will be 20-some thousand acre feet. So extremely small, low numbers. We are tapping into all our pump-in programs. As you're aware, we have programs with Semi-Tropic and others in the Central Valley, some of the farming districts where we bank water in wet years and then they pump it into the aqueduct for us. And we're tapping into all those. We are then we are taking a number of internal actions. And the focus of these actions is because we have lots of water in storage and we have good, healthy reserves on the Colorado River, we can fill our aqueduct completely on the Colorado River. So we have moved to an 8-pump flow. First time we've done that in 5 years. And we are moving maximum amount of Colorado River water into our system. We are going to be using our Gregg Avenue pump station, which is sort of in the northwest corner of Los Angeles. And that helps us move water further north and further west in our system than normally we can move Colorado River water. And that enables us to keep our state project water in storage for those parts of our system that really can only access state project water. We also have got an arrangement with DWR to use part of their pipeline system over in the Lake Skinner area to move DVL water through their pipeline into our Mills treatment plant that normally would receive state project water off the east branch of the system. And so that way we can use our previously stored water and continue to maintain our storage balances of state project water. And then finally, you'll be getting a board letter. It's currently on the agenda now, but the board letter will be coming out in the next day or so. And it's a shift program where what we would do is we'd ask some of our member agencies, and the primary agency would be Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And what we would ask them to do is, rather than buy state project water from Metropolitan, treat it and then deliver it to their customers, we can deliver Colorado River treated water through our Laverne Weymouth treatment plant, and then they would receive that, and then we would offset the cost of them having to buy treated water versus raw water from us, since they would then be not using their own treatment plant to treat the water. And that frees up, again, some of our state project water. So we're taking a host of actions to deal with this. The good news is we have significant water in storage. We went into this drought year with the highest level of reserves in our history. But this will take a hit on those reserves. And it also, because of the incredibly low volume of state project water, it's really causing sort of operational and plumbing and scheduling challenges on how we move water around. We have the water, but it's about how to get it to the right places at the right times. And then also we'll be coordinating very closely with DWR. This type of drought conditions is going to have severe impacts in the Central Valley and pockets of Northern California. We're much better prepared for it. We have the more robust infrastructure. We have this ability to move water east to west within our system and north to south and south to north. They don't really necessarily have that same level of infrastructure in the parts of the Bay Area, the Sacramento region, as well as the whole Central Valley. And so there's going to be, I would expect Governor to be expanding the drought declaration in the weeks to come and looking for more emergency measures to try and free up water for the Central Valley. And obviously they'll be talking to Metropolitan, and we're going to work with them to be cooperative where we can. But again, where you can in a year like this, you just don't have that many tools with such little water moving in the system in Northern California. So I'm going to pause there. As you can tell, a dramatic year in terms of water supply and a lot of activity taking place at Metropolitan and throughout the state. And I want to see if Devin, if you want to add any more color or detail to my comments on that.
Thank you, Jeff. Actually, you've done a wonderful job of describing the situation. The things that I would add, or maybe just some context, when you all think about the State Water Project and the size of that set of facilities, as you've probably taken inspection trips over the years to see those facilities, that's a system that was really designed to be able to deliver roughly 4 million acre feet. And to give you a sense of what is allocated this year, the whole base allocation for that system this year is roughly 200,000. So a system that was designed to deliver 4 million has an allocation this year of about 200,000 acre feet. And further context, you've probably seen the pumping plant that is at the headworks of the State Water Project. It's referred to as the Banks Pumping Plant. The capacity of that plant is 10,300 cubic feet per second in terms of the pumping capacity there. And this morning, they were pumping 400 CFS. So less than 4% of the capacity of that plant is being utilized right now. That's really how dry the conditions are. And just further support for what Jeff was saying. My staff is, to give you a sense of the coordination with the Department of Water Resources and the Central Valley Project, my staff is now on daily coordination calls with their teams. So it's really, when you have a system that's that large, that has so little water flowing into it, it's very difficult for them to match deliveries with the demands and where the needs are. And that's the challenge this year. And obviously we're doing everything that we can to work with the state to be able to make that happen. For us down here in Southern California, we're in pretty good shape, and really our eye is on 2022 and how do we best prepare if 2022 ends up being yet another year of critical drought. But numerically, it's pretty incredible. Right now, they're saying that this is, as a 2-year period, last year and this year, it's certainly the second driest period they've ever seen, and they may be revising that to say it's the driest period. And it's mainly because of what Jeff shared at the beginning, that they're just not seeing any of the runoff that they had expected. So it shows that there may not have been as much snowpack as they thought, and the snowpack they did have is being utilized by a lot of growth that has occurred early on because of the heat and the temperature is causing plant life to come out and use a lot more of that water early on than they had predicted. So pretty incredible situation. Nothing further to add, Jeff, unless there are questions.
So Director Williams, unless you would like to go to questions, I can update a couple other items real quickly. And the one I see it, you have on your agenda an update on Delta Island initiatives. We did have a report on that at Metropolitan, and we had a rather detailed report. Okay, yes, sir.
Let's see if we have any questions from our directors out there or anyone else in the audience. Seeing none, go ahead, Jeff.
So at our Bay Delta Committee, we had a thorough report on what the activities are on in the Bay Delta, and so I just was going to touch on that real briefly. You're aware that Metropolitan a few years back purchased some islands in the Delta. They are potentially in the path of the construction alignment for any Bay Delta conveyance changes or fix that in the future. In the meantime, we are discussing with rice farmers about ways to grow rice instead of typically what's farmed in the Delta is corn. Shifting to rice keeps the soil from subsiding in those islands because it's you cover them with water and then they don't get blown away and use the topsoil. So it helps preserve topsoil, preserves the long-term viability of the islands. And normally rice is grown further north in California, and this would be an experiment to see if it can be grown successfully this far south. There is some rice farming currently in the Delta, and we're looking at ways to do that as well. That would help preserve the long-term viability of it. I wasn't proposing to go through the entire presentation, but if that's, I see you guys have it up on the screen. And so if you do, maybe Devin could go through it pretty quickly, or did we have other staff here prepared to do that?
Yeah, Jeff, no, that wasn't the intention, just to have the presentation by way of just background. No, we were planning to present. Okay.
Because that does go into a fair amount of detail. I don't know, Devin, did you want to cover some of the items on there? We are doing a number of experiments with universities, and that's been very fruitful and productive in terms of trying to find new technology and new ways of maintaining these islands, and also turn them into environmental improvements for monitoring water supply, as well as making them better habitat as well for the environment. Devin?
Yeah, so I certainly wasn't planning on going through all the slides, but the general update that we wanted to share with the board this last month was to talk about the work that we've been doing and the opportunities that we see with these islands. So I think many people think of the islands as having one potential benefit, which is related to the Delta Conveyance Program. as that program goes forward, you'll need to have access in the Delta to be able to do that work, and these islands could help serve that purpose. But there are a number of other things that we're doing, really innovative things that we're doing that provide a direct benefit to Metropolitan on these islands. One of them is, I think you all have heard about this notion of an emergency pathway in the Delta. And the idea behind the emergency pathway is that through shoring up the levees on these islands, we're actually improving the resilience if there is a major earthquake in the Delta, that those levees on the islands that we own will be able to withstand that earthquake or the flood events and help to shore up this emergency pathway notion, so that when that happens, we'll still have some fresh water that's able to move down to the pumps during that kind of event. The work that we're doing on those levees is meant to serve as an example of work that can be done on other levees that help shore up that emergency pathway also. Some other innovative things that we're doing there, we're working with the fish agencies, and we're investigating whether we can actually use portions of the islands to do ponds that help us actually grow smelt. And this is a somewhat controversial idea, particularly in the environmental community, about whether you could get credit for smelt that is grown in an area like this out in the system. That's a bridge that we'll cross off in the future. The first thing is, can we actually help develop a framework where smelt can thrive in some of these areas? So we're doing research with the fish agencies using the land on our islands to investigate that concept. And another thing we talked with our board about was the notion of carbon sequestration. And you've probably heard a lot about this at the federal level. In fact, Biden's plans and his team, they're thinking more about with greenhouse gas goals in the future and how to manage them, that carbon sequestration is going to be a key part of that. So we've been working with Lawrence Livermore Labs to see whether there are opportunities on our islands to be able to sequester carbon and help contribute to that solution. We're very early in the goings there, but some of it relates to changes in the agricultural practices that you would have on the land. So you stop the subsidence, and you may start to actually accrete land and start to develop the land base there. But there are also even concepts of taking carbon and actually pumping it deep below the islands and capturing it that way. And we're investigating these things. Again, it's early in that process, but we just wanted to share some of those concepts with the board and let them know and let you know that we're really focusing on the best benefits we can get from this land, and there are a lot of great opportunities that we're working on.
Thank you, Devin. Now, President Williams, I'd like to turn this over to Catano for a demand management workshop report. And then following that, Kathy Viatella will update you on the Christina Garcia legislation. But I will be stepping off here in just a few minutes, and so I'll say goodbye and let my staff get to it. So, Catano.
Hi, can you hear me clearly? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, good. Okay, perfect. So I do have quite a few things for finance this time. I will not run through them, but so if you have any questions on any number of those things, that include Appendix A, we have an insurance item, we have a standby charges that is coming to the board. And additionally, we do have the rate refinement guidelines. So what we're bringing to you is really the recommended draft rate structure guidelines that we as a team worked on. We will be sending out a PowerPoint presentation by tomorrow, so you'll see what that is. And it's basically looking at what we did in 1998, 99, and sort of changing the last piece of that framework, which is what are the guidelines, the alternative guidelines that we want to follow for as we develop the rate structure for 2021, 2022. And so that's really what we're bringing this time around. And I hope that if the board likes or gives us more additional feedback, we can actually bring this rate structure framework guidelines to finance in June for adoption. It's important that we adopt the guidelines because this is what we're using to actually help guide the rest of the conversation, including the demand management. I will be bringing back demand management information letter or recommendation starting in June. That's if the team gets to it. We stepped back a little bit this time when we met last week to further discuss and sort of the team wanted to discuss what does it mean, what does demand management mean to MET, and more importantly, what is it doing for the member agencies. So we're going to have probably a good conversation in May about this topic, and if we do have or we get a recommendation, I will bring that as an informational report to the board in June. So that's where we are at the moment. I'll take any questions. Hello?
Sounds like you were perfect, Katana. So maybe D-Zinc and Kathy Viatella can cover legislation.
Well, I'd like to just come on to introduce Kathy Viatella. For those of you who don't know Kathy, she represents Metropolitan in our Sacramento office as our executive legislative representative. And she's been working with us for a couple of years, so hopefully you've had a chance to interact with her either on an inspection trip or other duties in the Sacramento area. And on my screen, you disappeared for a second, Kathy, so you scared me there. But we thought it would be helpful for Kathy to be here today to give an update on Christina Garcia's bill, AB 1195 regarding drinking water, and then to respond to other questions you might have. So Kathy?
Thank you, Dee. So good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to meet those of you I haven't met yet over this webinar. So just to give you an update on this bill, we're bringing it to the CNL committee as an action item, and staff are recommending an oppose unless amended position. So let me just walk through why that is. It's a bill that's dealing with governance of small systems, but also more broadly kind of trying to foster collaboration in Southern Los Angeles County and addressing public water system issues. And so maybe the best place for me to start is, you know, it was really intended to look at the challenges facing small urban water systems in Southern Los Angeles County that lack technical, managerial, and financial capacity to ensure a reliable and sort of safe and affordable drinking water supply. As you know, the state has had a policy focused on safe and affordable drinking water now for several years. They passed the Human Right to Water law back in 2018, I believe, or earlier than that. And then they've also been engaging in trying to implement a program through the State Water Resources Control Board that's largely been focused on rural systems. They've now focusing at the state level and talking about the urban systems, and that's what this bill presumably sets out to do. But it's kind of two bills in one, because the way it's constructed is while it requires that the state board appoint a commissioner to oversee sort of the small systems, and it could take over sort of operating those systems and also take them into receivership, it has a provision that applies to all public water systems and gives the board pretty broad, or the commissioner, I'm sorry, pretty broad authorities. So the commissioner would be required to develop and submit to the State Water Board a plan for long-term sustainability of public water systems in a designated area. And the area they're focused on is the geographic area that is overseen by the Water Replenishment District. And within that, it doesn't limit, you know, any public water systems. It says all public water systems. It oversees, it also proposes to oversee the Central Basin Municipal Water District, but it doesn't have any provisions in there sort of for protecting that agency's membership or participation in Metropolitan. It says it can assist public water systems, but again, without sort of limiting the authority to any particular public water system or system that's failing, which presumably is the intent of the bill. It can evaluate public water systems and their water infrastructure in the region. And again, without specification for, what's the criteria used to make that determination. And then it would oversee all of the state funding for groundwater cleanup on behalf of the state board. So the programs that the Water Replenishment District is doing. It would also oversee a study that the Water Replenishment District is doing that was funded by an appropriation last year to look at the needs of these small systems. So in addition to those provisions that are troubling because they kind of create redundant and duplicative responsibilities with those of some of the existing agencies, including the member agencies of Metropolitan and Metropolitan itself, the bill has an interesting provision that restricts surface and groundwater rights of public water systems generally, but again, without any specific reference to the jurisdiction of those water rights by the state board. So if a water agency exercises its rights, it can't sever those rights from the agency. So exchanges, for example, the cyclic program that Metropolitan manages, other kinds of conjunctive use projects, where you're doing an exchange and maybe exchanging surface water rights for pumping groundwater, those kinds of things could be limited by this language. And there's not really a justification for that in the bill. So that's another troubling provision. So Metropolitan's recommendation to oppose unless amend is to address these provisions I talked about and remove some of this problematic language, include provisions in the bill that would actually specify the intent of the bill is to focus on the small public water systems. And there was a recent study by UCLA that identified 29 of those in southern Los Angeles County. And if that's the target of the bill, then let's focus on that as a strategy. And one thing just to explain is the bill has been presented now and gone through 2 policy committee hearings. It's now in appropriations. In those policy committee hearings, the author had indicated that this is a work in progress, this bill. And so the reason for our oppose unless amended position is that we would, if they address the concerns, we could move to a watch on something like this and would be happy to sort of be a party, to the discussions. But one of the problems I think with this bill is it was originally introduced, there weren't discussions with public water systems. They've started having conversations and including probably with some of you, but it's not really been a broad stakeholder discussion where everyone's sitting down around the table trying to work out what's the best approach to solving the needs of these small systems. So I'll stop there and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Hearing none, let's move on. Continue.
Okay, I think that concluded your report, Kathy, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, at this point, I think we're ready to move on to the item number 4B, the legislative update by E.J. Caldwell. There's E.J.
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick, members of the board and visitors. I think Kathy did a great job of providing an overview of AB 1195. But I did want to, she mentioned the Appropriations Committee. I did want to kind of put that in a little bit of perspective because May is a very important month. And in fact, it's been a very important day up in Sacramento as well. So I'm sure Kathy's been pretty active. So May 14th is the last day for policy committees to meet prior to June 7th. May 21st is the last day for fiscal committees to meet and report to the floor. So the Appropriations Committee will need to take action by then. And then, of course, June 4th is the last day for each house to pass legislation that was introduced in that house. So when it comes to that specific bill, we should know a little bit more by that June 4th deadline. I assume that Appropriations will do a complete analysis as to the fiscal impacts of that legislation, which could be somewhat significant, which could be, I think, an issue. But I think I've heard from our consultants, and Kathy, if you disagree, please let us know. We anticipate that the bill will probably move to the floor and possibly over to the Senate, where I think more detailed discussions and possibly the amendments that Metropolitan Water District is seeking would kind of have an opportunity there in the Senate. As far as the schedule, the legislative schedule, I also want to highlight that June 15th is the deadline for the California budget to be adopted. So I think that kind of lays the table as far as what you'll see as far as the latter part of the legislative session. And I think that the revenue surpluses that people are talking about will provide ample opportunity for potential funding. And I'll touch on that a little bit as far as the Senate budget subcommittee actions in just a second. And then I did want to plug one thing, and Kathy, I don't know if you have anything to add regarding this since we have you here, is that later today, and actually just a short amount of time at 1:30, the Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee will actually be hosting an information hearing to talk about California and its preparation for another drought. And I thought Jeff did a great job of kind of outlining just some of the factors that we're looking at here in Southern California. But obviously with the governor's declared drought up in Sonoma County as well as Mendocino County, this information hearing, I think, will provide an excellent opportunity for us to look at that statewide approach. I just mentioned this briefly a second ago, but the Senate Budget Subcommittee did advance a historic $3 billion drought relief budget plan. As I mentioned, $3 billion to address the statewide intensification of drought conditions. And I think that from our perspective, at least West Basin's, looking at potential funding for infrastructure, water use sufficiency, and small community water systems is crucial to our region. And to see this move forward, I think is a great thing. I have heard people talk a little bit about whether this would move forward along with a potential water bond. And I did want to touch on that because it seems like consistently we're hearing that it's not a matter of either or, it's a matter of both and possibly doing even more. So I thought I would highlight that. The Senate Pro Tem did put out a great press release that's worth taking a look at because I know that our very own Director Gloria Gray and the chairwoman of Metropolitan Water District was quoted in that press release, as was a number of different Southern California and statewide general managers in support of that potential action. So moving forward to a couple of bills that I wanted to highlight, Assembly Bill 1500 by Assemblymember Garcia. As you recall, this is related to the Safe Drinking Water, Wildfire Prevention, Drought Preparation, and Flood Protection, Extreme Heat Mitigation, and Workforce Development Bond Act of 2022. That's a mouthful, but I did want to highlight, you are seeing an increase in the funding available through that measure. It's now up to $6.95 billion in general obligation bonds to address the impacts of climate change. And it would place this act on the June 7th, 2022 primary election ballot. Just a couple of items to highlight. There's $100 million for groundwater contamination. Obviously, looking at the West Coast and Central groundwater basins, this could provide some potential funding to mediate some of the issues that they're experiencing, primarily in the Central Basin, but could have benefits to the West Coast Basin. And of course, there is $300 million related to water recycling. I was looking at the language today. Again, the bill continues to be amended. And there are some questions about that chapter that we'd like to see addressed by Assemblymember Garcia, specifically related to energy usage, energy intensiveness, and the specifics of that chapter. I think in previous years, it's been a little bit broader when you looked at some of those bonds. And then just a quick update. Again, I've mentioned that there's been a flood of activity in these hearings. And I wanted to highlight, because I know some of your agencies are closely tracking Senate Bill 222 as well as Senate Bill 223 by Senator Dodd. Both bills continue to be moved through the legislative process. They were both amended earlier this week on May 3rd. And so we're kind of quickly reviewing those, and we'll provide some of that information back to our retailers as well as the water associations, because again, I know that they have a little bit more activity on those bills. So with that, President Williams, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, very good. Any questions out there, directors? I don't hear any out there, EJ, so,
Okay.
I'm turning back to Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, President Williams. So on item 5 on the Delta Island initiatives, we already covered that. Devin covered that matter, and Kathy had also on item number 6, obviously gave a very good a report on that on AB 1195. And item 7, pending items, I don't have any. So that President Williams, it brings us to item number 8, which is your gavel.
Well, hearing any question, any lingering questions out there? There are none. We are now adjourned. Thank you.